Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings and welcome to our Virtual Enlightenment Salon of September 25th, 2020. Our salon will be devoted to an ongoing transhumanist political campaign that we are all eagerly monitoring. So joining us is our distinguished panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Legislative Director, Jason Geringer, our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg, and our Director of Applied Innovation, David Shoemaker. And our special guest for today is our friend and our member, Daniel Twedt. Now, Daniel has been a dedicated participant in our virtual enlightenment salons. He has attended essentially every one of them in at least the recent year. And also, he had run for the city council in Thousand Oaks, California in 2020. During that election, he got 3% of the votes, and that number in absolute magnitude was quite impressive, 3,437. So congratulations to Dan. This year he's running again. So his campaign for Thousand Oaks City Council continues in 2022. So welcome to our friend Daniel Twedt. You have the floor.
Mute. There we go. I'm unmuted. Okay. Yeah. Usually pronounce it Tweed, by the way, but that's okay. It's Norwegian derived, so the pronunciation's a little bit uncertain. But yeah, I actually did run in 2018 also, where I got about 1.5% of the vote. So I'm running on the theory that I'm on an exponential track of vote doubling here. So if I get to 6% of the vote with this election cycle, and I double again in 2024. By 2026, I should have 32,000 votes, which would be a electoral majority. And I'm kind of testing to see if someone can achieve that vote count without spending, tens of thousands of dollars like the other winning candidates have done. And in fact, it's kind of a test of an election idea called sortition, where people would actually assume government jobs in the same way that jury duty is enacted, where you are qualified and you get rotated into a position. So there's a sortition kind of development element to the way I'm running my campaign. One of my taglines is I'm keeping the money out of politics by not raising or spending any. So that's, there's been a lot of criticism that our political system is so intensely driven with lobbying and PAC money and all kinds of, dark money even. In fact, I don't know if you know about the Citizens United decision, which a few years back declared that money is free speech. And so since corporations are persons and corporations can engage in unlimited funded free speech, that's kind of been a real challenge to the American democratic experiment. So I actually would encourage everyone to get involved in any kind of local race or public service office that they can. Possibly using the same strategy that I'm using to, we're gonna, like Tom Hartman says, democracy is not a spectator sport. Tag you're it. So that's how he closes a lot of his broadcasts. But a little bit about myself. First off, I really want to thank the U.S. Transhumanist Party, great organization, for inviting me to speak about the campaign and some of my surrounding ideas. I'm a California native that grew up in the South Bay, Manhattan Beach, and I had this amazing older brother, 4 years older, who really kind of indoctrinated me at an early age into a large spectrum of transhumanist ideas, from Bucky Fuller to Arthur C. Clarke, Marshall McLuhan. I mean, we shared a bedroom, and it was just late night conversations about anything science fiction, physics, futurism, and so that gave me an advantage of an accelerated reading level. I got to skip ahead a grade growing up. I think it was like second grade that I skipped halfway through. And I also got to be placed in a mentally gifted minor program where we got to go off and, all the bright kids got to play with, mechanical computers and whatever else was going on. So I really think that our job as transhumanists is to pass our knowledge along to someone younger, because they're the ones that are going to have to deal with the the kind of mess we've made of civilization. And I think cities are actually the key component of civilization. Right now, the majority of the 8 billion humans on Earth live in cities, and it's going to increase. And that's where the change, if we're going to do things like stop the mass extinction, which we're in, which is human caused, and it's the worst mass extinction since the dinosaur one. We have to change the way our cities work, and the one way I see doing this is a term called Edenicity. If you think of the biblical Garden of Eden, it was at 100% Edenicity. There was food everywhere. There was free healthcare. No one got sick, and unless you ate the wrong fruit, everything was cool. But what we have to do now is run our cities at 150% Edenicity to correct the overshoot that is going on the planet right now. We're using, I think, the resources of 4.5 Earths in our current lifestyle. And so it's not just a question of, we have to actually become like 20 times more sustainable to undo the damage that we've done. And Thousand Oaks is a great test city for this, because it is ringed by open space. It has a very aggressive policy of slow development and open space and human scale kinds of developments. We have a master plan now that really heavily emphasizes this high density mixed use kind of development, where you've got apartments above and shops and workspaces below, and under 4 stories. Something you hear a lot in city council public comments is, we don't want to become like Simi Valley or the San Fernando Valley, where it's like kind of this blight of strip malls and apartment, complexes. And so we had this great mayor, actually, Alex Goebel, and our library's named after him. And he basically told the developers of Thousand Oaks, when it was growing like crazy in the 60s and 70s, that if they wanted to build a development, they had to incorporate a certain percentage of open space with the development. And they actually sued the city, took them to court, and the mayor said, "Hey, that's our policy." And he ultimately prevailed in court. That magic word policy is like kind of an all-powerful, almost edict level commandment. So we've got this great. We have something in Thousand Oaks called COSCA. It's the Conejo Open Space Conservation Agency, and they've actually ceded land, for this network of trails. Recently, there's a backbone trail in the Santa Monica Mountains that lets you hike basically all the way to the beach. And this is another kind of pet project, if I could talk about, I call PermaTrail, which is short for permaculture trail. And permaculture is a portmanteau word of permanent agriculture, but if you look at the mileage or the distance of existing nature trails or greenways, it's about 50,000 kilometers, and it's been hypothesized that just by doubling that length, we could actually have a continuous planetary kind of blanketing trail system. So I know we've got some great permaculture installations just in the immediate area here. Down the road, there's a place called Apricot Farms, which Oprah Winfrey actually kind of highlighted, and there's a feature film about them called The Biggest Little Farm, which is really a great watch if you can get a hold of that. And they're at the farmers market here in town every week, and they do basically, it was a big blighted abandoned kind of orchard, and they transformed it into this lush Eden-like installation or landscape. So there's permaculture. Now, is permaculture going to provide the turnaround that we need in time? There's people, in fact, the originator of the word Edenicity, Kev Polk, he says, no, we've got to abandon the slow solution that's one of the tenets of permaculture, and go to corporate level solutions. I mean, it sounds like a bad word, but you look at Tesla, and their mission is accelerating the transition to sustainable energy for the world, and they are probably the most successful entity doing this right now. And I think that's what we need to do is operate at kind of corporate level solutions. The back to the land movement is not going to cut it, I'm afraid, for the rapidity that we need to save civilization. So I see, like I said, cities are this engine for saving civilization, and I'm privileged to live in Thousand Oaks, which is, I think, could be a model city for saving civilization. In fact, my kind of nickname for Thousand Oaks is Thousand Earths, because I'm a fan of the space expansion movement that actually Jeff Bezos was in the same Students for Space Development Club at Princeton that Kev Polk, who made up this Edenicity word, he was in that also. And hopefully we don't want to make it to where we have to create solar system habitats because we've destroyed Earth. That's the wrong approach. But I say we get to, and we can make the Earth back into a park-like preserve while all the manufacturing and toxic waste producing kinds of activities can happen in the radioactive vacuum that's 100 miles above our heads. So those are some of the kinds of ideas that I put out. And another one I should mention is the concept of equal access to the resources of nature, which the current libertarian movement has kind of decided that natural resources should be treated like personal property. And this is actually a wrong-headed implementation of free market ideas. Even Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize winning economist, said about land value tax or location value tax was the least bad tax. In other words, you're eliminating this kind of rent-seeking, non-wealth producing behavior. There's a kind of the guy who really pioneered this was Henry George, wrote a book called Progress and Poverty back in the 1870s, and it was actually the second best-selling book in the country next to the Bible. I mean, number one. He ran for mayor of New York. 100,000 people came to his funeral, but he's basically forgotten by history. But the game Monopoly was actually created by a student of his, and it was supposed to show that if you play by the old rules, the land value part goes into the community chest, and you only get to keep the improvement value, like for the houses and hotels you've built. So this is kind of the idea of taxing bads, not goods. Like why do we have an income tax? We want people to work, so that's a good. So don't tax goods, but tax bads, things like monopolizing, things you didn't create, like land or sunlight or the atmosphere. And in fact, we're going to need a property theory like this when we move off the planet, because there's only so much sunlight location that could be captured in a Dyson sphere, per se. Because, for example, you're going to shade that part of the solar output behind you. So we're going to have to treat things like solar energy and any asteroidal wealth as a kind of commons that you would perhaps annually rent, based on its location value in a market-based auction system. But we're kind of limited when it comes to Georgia's property ideas in California, because we had something called Proposition 13, which caps our property tax at 1%. But it did save a lot of widows that were about to get kicked out of their homes because they couldn't afford the property taxes. But there are workarounds to this, like what are called land development trusts, where you can mandate that a resident-owned community will always have affordable level housing in it. So that's a way to kind of work around that 1% property tax. And one thing I am a big supporter of is resident ownership of communities. We have a kind of the biggest issue right now in Thousand Oaks is that we have 7 low-income mobile home parks, and the parks are allowed to raise the rent corresponding to the inflation rate, which is currently running the whole rate, I think, is 8.5%. But there's something called core inflation, which excludes food and energy from that calculation. And when they wrote this rent stabilization ordinance 10 or so years ago, they mistakenly pegged it to the non-core inflation number. So we've had at our last city council meeting, like, hundreds of elderly residents that are, just in complete economic distress because they cannot afford, this upcoming, hundreds of dollar rent increase. So I would like to see Thousand Oaks, for example, look into making those parks resident-owned communities. I mean, this is actually a very viable thing to do. And this also applies to businesses. There's an employee stock ownership buyout law in California. I think it might be in other states, but it's very generous in California. You can actually sell a business to your employees with no capital gains tax, and you can continue to control the business while it's employee owned, and employees are probably going to have more pride of their work output since they're stakeholders in the business. So that would be another kind of idea I would be promoting if I should make it to the council. But even if I don't win, I can still speak about these ideas at the various fora that are coming up. There's one on Wednesday that the League of Women Voters puts on every year. I spoke at the last 2 occurrences of those. There's another big one with the Chamber of Commerce sponsoring. And I think this is the biggest field of candidates we've had. 10 people are running for 3 open seats in this election. We have what's called at-large council members. Some cities have districts assigned to each council seat, but we use the at-large system. Another thing I would like to see to reduce inequality is a price system which could be voluntarily adopted, which is based on the hourly income of a person. So instead of charging a fixed price like $10 for an item, you could say this item is priced at 5 minutes of your time. So a rich person is paying a proportional amount of their wealth as a less rich person would. And this system is actually used in things like toll roads in some places. It's also used in traffic fines. But I think a lot of businesses would be amenable to some kind of equity based ability to pay pricing. I know Amazon Prime is half price if you're on food stamps or EBT. You can get that for $6 a month instead of $12 a month. So that's one example of this being done. I think we need to also encourage what are called time banks, which are neighborhood hour trading of services. Like this is one form of an alternative currency that has been used in thousands of instances. These are basically a group of about 100 to 150 people, maybe a small neighborhood size group. They offer services that they have at a one-to-one exchange rate. And actually the IRS has said these kinds of systems aren't taxed because there's no money changing hands. Someone is trading an hour of car repair for an hour of dog walking or gardening or whatever. I actually think that some skills are worth more than others. I mean, an hour of brain surgery is obviously worth more than an hour of dog walking. So it would probably be good to set up a time bank where you had gradated levels of skill exchanging. Another thing I'm going to advocate for is tool libraries. They can be run through the public library. Some libraries already do this, where you can rent out hand or power tools. It probably gives the legal team liability nightmares, but we have our library has a 3D printer, which you can use just for the cost of the filament if you want to print something out there. And I actually printed out my call sign. I don't have it handy, but I made a little badge that I could put on my hat that's got my extra class ham radio call sign, KK6 VDR. And that brings me to what I call grid resilience security. See, I think we've built this civilization grid, which is composed of, very long supply chains for food and electricity and communications, and they're actually quite vulnerable. And the most obviously vulnerable one, it's been pointed out, is our power grid, which has numerous critical failure points, which are the enemies of our civilization know about. And that's really our soft underbelly. Things like electromagnetic pulses could cripple the power grid, either man-made or nature, as the sun has been known to put out massive particle storms, which would induce so much voltage in the conductors that the transformers would basically explode. And these transformers take sometimes years to replace. They're basically custom built, and we don't have replacements in order. So microgrids are a very good situation to be exploring. In fact, with the advent of electric cars, they can become, power walls, and electric cars can form the backbone of neighborhood microgrids, which I think is extremely critical to work on, because it's been estimated that a power grid failure would basically result in something like 90% fatalities in 6 months to a year. Because if you think about it, everything we do depends on the power grid. the water being pumped, the ATM systems working, the food getting delivered. So that would be what I've kind of come up with is each day of the week could be devoted to a different resilience strategy. So the power grid would be Faraday Fridays. Take Saturday would be satellite Saturdays, where you look at how vulnerable you are to atmospheric toxic events. Everyone should really have a hermetically sealed supplied air room to, in case of a toxic airborne event. Sunday would be kind of an open, fun day where we would brainstorm and have neighborhood kind of parties. Monday would be Mound Day, which is permaculture. Usually involves you're mounding the terrain to create water flows. You're creating swales and mounds to create these permanent forest kinds of water flows. Tuesday I call a two-way Tuesday for the communication grids. In fact, our local ham club has a what's called a net check-in every Tuesday, where they basically just, you give your call sign and ask how you're coming in, to the repeater, which is, if you have a small radio, like, this one only puts out maybe like 5 watts, but if it can have line of sight to a hilltop repeater station, then it amplifies and gives you wide area coverage to anyone else who's tuned to the output of that repeater. And by the way, ham radio is a great global community of preparedness and high-tech kind of people. The license is not that difficult to get. They've dropped the Morse code requirement. It used to be you had to demonstrate 5 words a minute Morse code reading and sending proficiency, or at least reading. But it's just basically multiple choice questions. And if you study the question pools, I didn't even think I was going to pass all the way up to extra class. I just studied for the general and said, well, what the heck, I'll take the extra test. And I guess I passed that. So that's a great, that's the highest level of license. I think it gives you 1,500 watts antenna power. Maybe is that right, David? Is it 150? It's 1,500, yeah, which, you can do amazing off-grid communication with that. Now, of course, you want to use the least amount of power to make the contact. That's considered good ham radio etiquette. That's called QRP, is the Q code for just doing the least amount of power you need to make a contact. So I think with this kind of neighborhood level day of the week system, we could actually create a third leg of society. Usually there's the government leg and the economic business leg, but the civil society leg is one that really could be strengthened right now. I think there's a lot of functions that we assign to government that really could be made voluntary. In fact, the best government is one which is a totally voluntary buy-in, kind of government by subscription. Like, it's also known as panarchy, which is, but I think this could be achieved in the digital twin space. If we create like there's a process that NASA pioneered in 2003 called digital twinning. And this is basically taking sensor-rich data sets and creating a sandbox virtual mirror of the real world, the thing you're trying to simulate in the real world. In fact, the chip maker NVIDIA has recently said they're making a digital twin of Earth to help model the climate system. But, again, these digital twins are only going to be as good as the data that they're based on. But you can do amazing things with predictive modeling to stop, problems before they become real world problems. They can be virtual problems, and they can be solved in the virtual space. But I should also, one other thing I want to mention is I'm on a X Prize team for the gigacarbon removal project. There's a team in France which is basically trying to build large seasteads for refugees to live on, and their website is Tuvalu-51.org, because the island nation Tuvalu is one of the countries most threatened right now by rising sea levels. So the 51 refers to, let's make it the 51st state. In fact, let's make all these seasteads, satellite states of the supposed leader of the free world, which I hope we still are. I don't know if the rest of the world sees us that way. But, I'm had to take the loyalty oath to run for office. So, I'm still, I think America's pretty great, but, we have that spirit. We could be even better. And that's what keeps this country at the forefront of so many things. I guess I'm kind of talked out for the moment. If anyone has any comments or questions, I'd love to get an interchange going.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan, for that overview. This is certainly quite a creative and multifaceted campaign that you are running. I would like to, first of all, acknowledge our generous contributors today. Thank you to Celeste Castaldo for your extremely generous contribution. And then Alan Crowley also contributed $10, and he says half of that goes to the Thousand Oaks local party. So, Dan, if you can coalesce a local transhumanist party around yourself and your campaign, you are going to receive $5 as a result of doing that. And consider any incidental expenditures that you might have. I know you said you're not collecting or spending any money, but if you need to print out leaflets or something of that scale, then let me know and I could send you $5 via PayPal. That's how this is going to work. But of course, taking money out of politics is important, and it's admirable. When I ran for the Indian Hills General Improvement District Board of Trustees in both 2018 and 2020, I did not accept any donations and I did not spend any money for campaign purposes. I ran an online campaign. I had a profile of me done in the local newspaper in Douglas County, Nevada. Now, I do see the advantages of some small-scale spending, enough for flyers or perhaps neighborhood meetups if you get, say, pizza for the attendees or something along those lines to entice them to come over and hear your ideas. I don't see that as necessarily being a corrupting influence in politics. I would see mega expenditures as creating a situation where candidates feel like they need to pour in vast sums of money simply in order to get name recognition, in order to compete with the incumbents. But I also see some limitations of campaign spending, as we saw in 2020 with the campaign of Michael Bloomberg, who tried to become the Democratic presidential nominee. However, despite his many billions of dollars, and I would imagine at least tens of millions of campaign expenditures, his campaign did not gain very much traction. He kept polling consistently in the single digits, and that suggests to me that the suboptimalities of contemporary politics go beyond just campaign spending. There are other factors that keep incumbent politicians in their place, and there's an entire nexus of problems that we would need to resolve. So with that being said, we have a good question from John H. And John is wondering if Dan is running as the Transhumanist Party candidate. So one of the purposes of this virtual enlightenment salon is to essentially ask Dan some questions in advance of a possible endorsement vote by our members. So prior to the day of the general election, we are hopefully going to have an endorsement vote, and our members will be able to make an informed decision based on Dan's commentary in this salon, as well as any other analysis of his ideas and how they align with the U.S. Transhumanist Party platform that we could bring to bear. So, Dan, I will pose this question to you, and I am curious, where do you think are your greatest areas of alignment with the U.S. Transhumanist Party platform?
Well, I'm a believer in pretty much the whole platform. I wish it had a Georgist or geoist component about land use and UBI. I know we had a problematic version of the universal basic income by I think Zoltan Istvan proposed the conversion of public lands to a lease status, and the profit derived from that would fund a UBI. There's a much more interesting, I think, version of a UBI proposal called solar dividends. .com or .org, but Professor Robert Staten at UC Santa Cruz basically has a plan worked out where we would price solar electricity at $1 per kilowatt. We would build these large solar farms, and they would become resident owned by the nearby communities, and then they would compound interest enough so that when someone turns 18, they would have a compounded interest check based on the solar dividends literally generated. I mean, the sun is, it's raining soup. Grab a bucket, as Robert Heinlein said. I do like, especially the part of the U.S. transhumanist platform that deals with sentient rights, because I think this is bound to become, an unaddressed issue by any other party that I can see. In fact, I think we need an upgrade of human rights to what I would call humane rights, with a capital E at the end to kind of distinguish them, where we don't have just a human-centric view of civilization, but we have a whole life view of civilization. How we are actually the stewards of this creation. I recently actually formed a nonprofit religious organization that's called Permatrail, and it's registered with the state of California, and it's going to propose this creation care kind of effort. Unfortunately, being a nonprofit religious organization, you can't do any political stuff, but I did become an ordained minister back when I was in my early 20s with the Universal Life Church. I think instant ordination by decree is a very very good way to promote consciousness of things greater than oneself, of the greater creator, which it's still a mystery, but that doesn't mean we can't engage with the mystery in all the ways that we can. But yeah, I think I would like to see the planks of the Transhumanist Party platform phrased in what are called municipal resolution language, where it starts out with a whereas, bullet point, whereas, bullet point, therefore be it resolved, and it could just be, a symbolic bully pulpit kind of thing, like declaring, Thousand Oaks Longevity Day, or, Thousand Oaks Grid Resilience Day. I mean, this is something city council people do all the time, and, it doesn't necessarily have the force of law, but it has that bully pulpit educational value. So yeah, I would love to start creating resolutions for potential adoption of all the planks. But yeah, I think I'm 95 to 99% on board with everything I've read in the Transhumanist Party platform. I also do like the Democratic Freedom Caucus. I am a registered Democrat because I can't register as a Transhumanist Party member, but there's a small caucus that has Georgist beliefs within the Democratic Party, and they're very highly libertarian oriented, which I've always been kind of a libertarian minded person, but I don't like the monopolization of natural resources part that most libertarians seem to ascribe to. So yeah, I hope I get an endorsement from the USTP, and I'm planning to, like I said, keep on this exponential vote doubling, and eventually make it in 2026. But if I get elected this time around, that's even better.
Yes, thank you very much, Dan. And I certainly think the idea of turning the USTP platform planks into municipal resolutions is a promising one. It could certainly gain more attention for those platform positions. Now, I also like your emphasis on the rights of sentient entities and the idea of a longevity day or a resilient grid day. We do support both longevity and smart infrastructure as part of our platform. Now, I wanted to address the idea of the federal land dividend as contrasted with a land value tax, because this was also inquired on by our friend Mike Lezine. And the section of the USTP platform that was alluded to in your remarks, Dan, was section 97 on the federal land dividend. And what it states is the U.S. Transhumanist Party supports the establishment of a federal land dividend, whereby currently unused federal lands, with the exception of national parks, national forests, and notable landmarks, will be leased to private corporations that agree to operate in an environmentally conscientious manner, with the proceeds of the lease funding a universal basic income for the United States population. So this was indeed Zoltan Istvan's idea when he ran for President of the United States in 2016, as well as for Governor of California in 2018. And this is a proposal that particularly makes sense in light of the situation in California, where there is a lot of unused federal land, as there is in Nevada, where about 84 or so percent of the land is federally owned. But much of that land is not remarkable. It's not like Yosemite National Park, which has some beautiful landscapes and scenery, and we wouldn't want essentially significant development to occur there other than whatever is needed to facilitate people's enjoyment of that locale. However, there's plenty of land which is just barren scrubland, essentially, and that can be turned into a more valuable set of uses through this kind of approach, where the land would continue to be owned by the federal government in the case of the federal land dividend, but one could think of adaptations for state-owned land as well, and making sure that there is some economically worthwhile activity. It could even be tourism, for example. And that economically worthwhile activity could then fund initiatives. It could be a universal basic income, or it could be something else, some other aspects of development of a particular community or supporting people's standards of living. So that's contrasted with a land value tax, which seems to me to be a modified version of the property tax system. And it's correct, this stems from Henry George's idea. And George supported replacing all other taxes with a single land value tax. That was his main concept. My inclination would be to say that would be a better system than the status quo, where we have essentially an entire array of taxes on anything and everything that one could conceive of. And that results in essentially a maze of rules and reporting requirements that people have to navigate in order to get anything done. Now, the U.S. Transhumanist Party has a different approach to taxation and simplification of the tax system. In section 36 of our platform, we say that we support the elimination of graduated taxation and income taxation more generally. So at this point, we're in alignment with your remarks, Dan. Now, the next part is a bit different. It states, instead, the United States Transhumanist Party advocates a flat percentage of sales tax applicable only to purchases from businesses whose combined nationwide revenues from all affiliates exceed a specified threshold. This tax should be built into the price of goods from such large businesses and should not impede transaction efficiency in any manner. Transactions pertaining to wages, salaries, gifts, donations, barter, employee benefits, and inheritances should remain completely untaxed, as should transactions involving solely individuals and/or small businesses, for whom the establishment of a tax reporting infrastructure would be onerous. Furthermore, the U.S. Transhumanist Party platform reads, all taxes on land and property should be abolished. And I think the incentives here for our system would be to take the tax burden off of ordinary individuals to the extent possible and place the tax burden on entities that are already reporting and forwarding sales taxes to various levels of government. So right now, most sales taxes are paid at the state level, but surely corporations such as Walmart or Home Depot have the infrastructure in place to facilitate that reporting of taxes. Our concern with a land value tax or any sort of property tax is exactly what you stated, Dan, that individuals could be priced out of the opportunity to own their homes. So if somebody lives on a fixed income or doesn't have an income, say an elderly person or a disabled person, but they paid off their mortgage in the past, and so they have this land, which is in their name. Today, they still have to pay property taxes, and that can get onerous. Sometimes people may have to move, or they may lose their homes. They may have to consider a rental situation instead, which adds to their recurring expenditures. So with the Transhumanist Party platform, we are trying as much as possible to prevent those situations. Now, in terms of different approaches to a land value tax, one could consider a tax on the value of corporate-owned land. This is not aligned with the USTP platform, but I'm just thinking of a way to spare individuals from that tax burden, spare natural persons from that. But it's an interesting conversation, and this is just an area that I wanted to highlight as a way of illustrating how the USTP platform approaches these issues to bring that into the conversation. So now what I want to do as our next stage is to ask our panelists what questions they have for Dan in terms of any clarifications you want from Dan about his stances or any areas you want to bring into this conversation. So who would like to begin? David Shoemaker.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for being here, and I loved your introduction. I think you covered a lot of different things. I took quite a few notes, as a matter of fact. And thank you for the plug for amateur radio as well, being a fellow ham myself. Where I wanted to go with the questioning, though, was something that you did talk about, which was green space. You talked about let's say, I'm looking back through my notes. Anyway, let's go with green space. That was one thing that you talked about from a previous mayor. So what I want to connect here is, how does Dan connect with the demographic that's predominant in Thousand Oaks, and how does that connect to whatever the main issues are that people think about in Thousand Oaks? So in preparation for that, I jumped on my trusty friend Google and said, tell me about Thousand Oaks, California. And I come up with population, and I come up with what the demographic set looks like, what the political mix and so forth is. It seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be a fiscally conservative area, but pretty generally open past that in ideas for problem solving. So I think the green space fits into that perhaps really well. But what would be the issues that you would target or are targeting to identify with the community? So when people look at Dan's candidacy, they say, oh, I see that this is why I should be interested in Daniel, because of these specific things. So I said a lot there, so let me recap. The demographic, the political interests for the area, how does that fit for you? And then maybe even bring in transhumanist ideas, if you wish.
Yeah, we actually are kind of a big transhumanist city already. One of our major employers is Amgen, the biotech company. I think they have like 10 or 20,000 employees here. We also have one of the foremost makers of drones. AeroVironment is a local Thousand Oaks company, and there's another company that does robotic warehouse robot controlled pallets. So I think, and in fact, one of the questions I got last time I ran from a constituent was, "What's your policy on human drone flight? These personal kinds of vertical takeoff, machines, which are probably going to be highly desirable and highly popular because congestion is a very big concern of this constituent base. The 101 freeway is, Ventura Highway. It's like very prone to being congested, and we are also under housing pressure from the state. There's I think it's called Measure E, where we're something like 30,000 housing units behind on where we're supposed to be in a state mandated way. I want to solve this problem with 3D printing auxiliary dwelling units in backyards of homes that would like to have them. There's these large-scale 3D printers. I don't see why the city can't purchase one and make it available to residents who want to operate it at cost, given a technician that's able to assist with that. And you can even use in-site materials to constitute the 3D print material. And it doesn't even have to be 3D printed. I mean, there's foldable homes now that are sub $50,000, and I think we really need to move to a car-free city kind of direction. Kev Polk, the creator of this Edenicity podcast, if you look at how much of a city's landmass it goes to roads and parking cars, and it's basically like half the city is swallowed up by these 3,000-pound steel battering rams that if you look at, they weigh like 20 times more than the driver, whereas a bicycle weighs like half the weight of or a third or a fourth of the weight. And electric bicycles coupled with like a high-speed mass transit solution really are the way cities are going to have to go to solve the mass extinction crisis, I think. I have another kind of more novel concept that would help transition away from cars, where we could actually have zip lines that are strung across retractable towers by heavy lift drones, and the drone would actually do the pulling of the person or the passenger cargo unit along the temporary zip line, and that's basically a safety line. If the drone fails, you're not going to crash on something. And then these towers, once they're done with, could retract back into the earth. We're looking to underground our utilities anyway. I mean, we've had massive numbers of wildfires caused by sparking power lines. I think most of the billion-dollar destructive fires have been caused by above ground, short outs of electrical infrastructure. So I think building these retractable zipline drone towers would not be that big a stretch when you consider the amount of underground infrastructure that could really be so Eden-like. We could, free up habitat. I mean, it's a shame that the Edenicity podcast is not more listened to. I think the last I checked, there were under 50 views. But I mean, this guy is just the guy whose policies I think I really want to be a loudspeaker, a sounding board for. I think there's a high-tech demographic, there's a future-minded demographic, and it's obvious that standard government systems and spokespeople are just they're not anticipating this era of accelerating exponential technology. I'm really seeing hardly any voices for the transhumanist, decades that we're moving into. The stuff they're talking about is, the old cliche. It's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic kind of policies. So, I think I'm speaking to that demographic that feels like government is not anticipating the rapid accelerations that are coming.
That's an awesome metaphor for it too. Rearranging the chairs, the deck chairs in the Titanic. I like that. Go ahead, Gennady.
Yes, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Dan, for your answer to David's question. And indeed,
I hope I answered it.
Transhumanist perspectives are sorely underrepresented in contemporary politics, and you're correct that contemporary politicians do not look at technological solutions nearly to the extent that they should. So we're happy to have your voice as part of that political conversation. And now let us go to Ben Ballweg for his question.
Thanks for being here today, Daniel Tweed. And thanks to David for asking about what the issues are that Thousand Oaks voters are most concerned about. Check on that. For the Edenicity thing, I think, Jason, you had told me about the solar punk thing. So I'll be checking out that Edenicity podcast. That sounds cool. A question I have is, for the constituents that are voting for you even, what are some of, say, your transhumanist positions with which they struggle most? And they're like, I'll vote for you, Dan, but I just don't like that part of it, or something like that. Any thoughts on that sort of question?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of negative baggage that's falsely ascribed to the transhuman universe. You've got extremists saying this is an attempt to steal people's souls or whatnot. It's almost like they're looking for a revival of the Salem witch burnings, and transhumanists are going to be the new witches that need the burning. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in repackaging these ideas that, no, we're not telling people to abandon their humanity, and we're not promising this dark, brave new world kind of future. But I mean, we still need to be aware, and there are dark, possibilities at any given time that we need to anticipate and design to prevent. The greatest thing about science fiction is the cautionary tale story that I think. So yeah, I would say, running as a transhumanist party candidate, maybe half the people are going to have some propaganda that they've been misinformed on what transhumanism is about. I guess it's possible to run as a indefinite longevity advocate, or as a design science, anticipatory design science person. But I'm all in favor of rehabilitating or continuing to spread the good messages about transhumanism in spite of all the negative characterizations that are out there.
Yes, thank you, Dan. And I think it's quite a worthwhile cause to, let's say, improve the image of transhumanism in people's minds, at least the minds of those people who have any preconceived notions about it. Our viewer Ampero says, I'm actually terrified of the anti-transhumanist people. So I think one reason why some of our members and our viewers may be worried about such sentiments is that sometimes those sentiments stem from completely irrational notions, like the rantings of conspiracy theorists who have no connection with what transhumanism actually stands for. They just make up a set of nefarious ambitions, attribute them to some Illuminati lizard people who do not actually exist, and yet who are somehow tarnished by association with the name transhumanist. So I do also think it's worthwhile to call oneself an indefinite longevity proponent. So one does not preclude the other, I think both of those terms are useful in getting people introduced to these ideas and introduced to the scope of possibility when we consider emerging technologies and what they will be able to do. And Ampero also supplements the previous remarks by saying, how can you call yourself pro-life if you oppose indefinite longevity? And this is a reference to people like Alex Jones, who try to emphasize these more conventionally right-wing or alt-right talking points, and they may say that they're pro-life, but they don't really support the life extension of the people who are alive today. So how can that be consistently pro-life? I completely agree with that critique of Alex Jones and other conspiracy theorists of a similar sort. And I think, Dan, you're doing a great service to the people of Thousand Oaks just by using the term transhumanist and explaining what it means and tying it to these creative technological solutions to the issues that Thousand Oaks faces. Now, I think, Jason, you have some questions for Dan, so please feel free to go ahead.
Okay, yeah, me and Dan talk a lot. He's an awesome guy. I really like him. He's down to earth, normal guy, but yet smart enough to know that he don't know it all. And then he's smart enough to go and find the people and not afraid to, hey, what's this? If you don't know something, he finds it out, goes and looks it up, talks to somebody, who knows? And he's a key member of the Omni-Futurist group that we have going on that's actually taking a deep dive into what is going to be the economic singularity and what should we do about that, which is taking a deep dive into basically every governmental system there is, trying to look at which would be optimal in the transition period. And so, I just, he's also a popcorner, as they call it, kind of like me. He's creative to where, he comes up with some really creative ideas that are, I even for me is pretty whoa. He's got this really good idea for a thumb drive thing instead of giving out laptops. Well, we can talk about that idea later, but if you want to talk about that, there's also he's got the Tunaville group that's got some neat people in it. We've had some interesting chats in there, and he's got that Designing Systems Facebook group. So he's into lots of stuff, and he didn't even touch on none of that. He's pretty humble, I guess, too, huh? And you want to tell us about, like, maybe the Tunaville group or the Omni-Futurists or any of that stuff, man?
Yeah, Tunaville is a slang term for Tustin, California, and I spent some time in that Orange County city, and some people from Tustin started this weekly kind of Saturday night virtual cocktail party where we just kind of come on and chat about whatever we feel like chatting about for an hour or two. But yeah, it would be great if you want to crash the Tunaville cocktail party some Saturday night. We've had Jason's been there a couple times. It's just kind of an open, talk about whatever you want, mingle kind of session. The Deliberative Systems Research Group, I did start a Facebook page to look at the vast spectrum of how humans deliberate their governance. And, again, I'm an intentional community advocate. I think there's as many potential governance systems as people want to create intentional communities. I have a problem with intentional communities that exploit or, violate human rights. I mean, that's kind of a possible gray area where you might actually want to shut down an intentional community that is doing grossly awful things. So that's something that's I think what we have right now is a highly unintentional civilization. There's something called the Dunbar number. This anthropologist from Oxford named Robin Dunbar did a study and came up with this number about the maximum number of people you could form a fairly close relationship with is around 150 people in the average human lifetime. So this kind of suggests to me that people should start creating these communities of around 150 people, and that's actually about the number of people that live on the average neighborhood block. If you consider like 33 homes, about 5 people per home. So, these may not be your closest Dunbar set of community people, but they should still be treated halfway as such because they are your proximity Dunbar group. And I think that's also a good size for one of these skill shares I was talking about, these neighborhood time banks where people perform labor errands or skilled bartering of skills between them. There's another thing I was thinking of mentioning. It's probably gonna take 5 or 10 minutes, but I guess I could jump in and talk about a universal permanent number system that has been proposed by a Professor Hugh Ching. Basically, I'm doing a variation on that using the sequence of a deck of playing cards. If you look at the number of possible sequences of an average deck of 52 playing cards, it's the number 52 factorial, which is actually a 67-digit number. So I was considering doing something kind of like the International Star Registry, where this is a outfit that got started in 1979. You can name a star after someone for whatever it is, $50, and they publish it in the Library of Congress every year. Now there are certain decks sequences that are more memorable, and these could be kind of auctioned off and also used as a numbering system for design science solutions. It's useful to be able to encode things, and actually you can memorize the sequence of a deck of cards. There's an annual competition for people that can do this the fastest. I think there's a guy who can do it in 1 minute 15 seconds. He'll flip through the cards and then he'll take another deck and arrange them the same way. And he uses a technique which you could look up his videos. I think his name is Bruce White or something, but it's an old technique called the memory palace, where you have a digital twin, house or palace in your head. It's got different rooms, it's got different furniture, and you can imagine the cards with a person and a verb sequence and an activity. And then you do this in groups of 3, and it's a little complicated to explain now. But there's a guy who's a privacy cryptographic expert. You may have heard of Bruce Schneier, Counterpane Technologies, and he once came up with a encryption algorithm that you can do completely manually using a deck of cards. It's called Solitaire, and basically you have one deck that's your encrypting deck and one's your decoding key deck. And if you ever get let's say the authorities were breaking down your door, if you threw the cards into the air, you scrambled the key. So it's kind of a good thing you could work into a science fiction story about future authoritarian dystopias. But yeah, that would it's kind of this deck of cards thing is something I'm working on as a way to number all these solutions, and it's in its nascent stages. So that's really just the outline of it I can talk about right now. But yeah, thanks for all the kind words, Jason, and any other questions or comments?
Yeah, is it true that you said something about your opponent has one of his taglines, no jokes or something like that?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've gotten to know one of my candidates who's also in the race. He's running on a pretty much straight libertarian philosophy idea ticket, Jeff Schwartz, and we've had some interesting discussions. And he even brought up this one idea, which he said, "Hey, at the candidate forum, you know, we could get into like a contrived argument with each other to get more time, you know, because you know how in debates, people, oh, hold on, I was mentioned there, I need to respond to that, you know." So I don't know if we'll do that, but it was a funny idea. And he's obviously spending money. He's, you know, putting up yard signs, and yeah, I think the average candidate is probably spending at least $10,000 on their campaign. But
yes, well, this is why in the debates that I moderate, I follow a cumulative time format so that any additional engagement by one of the candidates essentially subtracts from their total time that they have available to make their arguments, so that these kinds of coordinated maneuvers wouldn't work, and candidates trying to grab time at the last moment when their time is about to run out also wouldn't work.
It wouldn't fly around here.
Indeed.
Very
Indeed.
rational strategy there, Gennady.
Yes, thank you.
By the way, this is the thumb drive, the weatherproof thumb drive that people could hang it on their back of their mailbox, and it could be an easy way to create a digital little free library. I think Jason was talking about the thumb drive idea. I'm a big fan of the little free libraries, and they should also be in digital formats for neighborhoods.
Yes, quite an interesting idea with regard to that. Now let us go to Ben Ballweg. He has a follow-up question.
Just wondered if you needed to achieve a certain amount of votes or something like that before you'd be invited to the candidate forum. That sounds like a really awesome way to get your message out.
No, if you've filed on the ballot, they invite all the people who've. And by the way, that was a free process, filing. I just had to get 25 signatures of local voters, and then turn that in by the deadline and fill out the paperwork. And so it's nice to have a low bar of entry for public service.
Yes, absolutely.
One other thing I'm going to be promoting is the idea of jury nullification. I don't know if people are familiar with this, but jurors constitutionally, they're not informed about this. So it's called the Fully Informed Jury Association. But they're not only judging guilt or innocence at a trial, but they're also judging the applicability of the law in this case. So they can say, well, yeah, this is a bad law for this case, so we're just going to nullify the application of the law. But this has been highly suppressed in government culture. I guess if you stand outside a courthouse and pass out flyers telling jurors that they have the ability to do this, the court will often just throw that juror off, because they don't want to go through this extra step. But it is a part of American jurisprudence and history. If you look up the case of Peter Zenger, who was a publisher who was prosecuted for writing seditious speech in his newspaper, and that was a famous example where jurors nullified that law, and he was not prosecuted. So, little sidebar there on the.
Wow, see, that's what I mean. He's got all this interest. I had no idea about that. He comes up with this stuff that would just. It's like, wow, okay. I'm going to check that out.
So I will point out also that Section 65 of the USTP platform states that the United States Transhumanist Party supports efforts to ensure a jury is fully informed on its rights and responsibilities, including jury nullification. So that aligns with the comments that Dan made just now. So thank you for that, Dan. And now let us go to Art Ramon for any questions from him.
Hey, Dan, thanks for coming to the show. Several years back, there was this Red for Ed movement where the teachers were complaining here in Arizona that they weren't getting paid enough. And I don't quite remember the details, but you mentioned Tesla, but they're a for-profit company. I mean, they're selling a product and people are forking over money for it. And as far as a school district, I think they get their money from property taxes. So if you eliminate the property taxes, how are you going to pay these teachers? So how would you fund teachers and get them paid better in some of these scenarios that you mentioned? Because I know here in Arizona, it comes up like every single time. The state lottery supposed to fix all the problems. But then when you look at it, when it finally gets past the laws, and they never fund public schools, they fund universities, but public schools don't get squat. You bring it up and they're like, well, I've talked to people on the board here for the state lottery, and they just kind of make some BS excuse, of why it just didn't happen. People didn't vote for it or whatever it was. So how do you get teachers compensated more? I mean, I'm not sure how things work there in California, but here in Arizona, it's like there's never enough money for teachers. How do you get them paid well?
Well, I'm a big proponent of universal public education or universal education. I think if you get rid of that, you're basically undermining civilization itself. We're just one generation away from being monkeys instead of readers, basically, if we don't support, Norway. I love to use Norway as an example where, they have all this North Sea oil wealth money, and the taxes are high, but you get healthcare provided, you get higher education provided. And actually, the Scandinavian countries have the highest per capita percentage of billionaires because I think of this infrastructure of robust, educated populace. So I'm a fan of, homeschooling, charter schools. I'm a product of public schools, and I think they did an okay job. I'm grateful for the education. Was it the best? It's debatable, I suppose. But yeah, my mother was actually a fourth grade public school teacher for a year, and she was very beloved by her class, but she left that profession to raise a family. So I have huge love and respect for the teaching profession, and they are underpaid, they are under-acknowledged. We have a very contentious school board race. People are showing up, with extremist ideas about book banning from the public libraries and curriculum censorship. Should elementary school kids be learning about sex and gender kinds of issues? So that's always a fiery topic. I don't know if I'd want to run for school board. It seems like the thing that you're most likely to get death threats from MAGA people. It's democracy is degenerating into that kind of bad stuff. I did before I ran for office. I actually was an election poll volunteer in 2016. I helped out at the polling place, but it's not just schools that are under threat, but our democracy is under definite threat from extremists and people who want to have an oligarchy, have an authoritarian kind of theocracy almost, I think. So this is no time to sit on the sidelines for any of these issues to save our open, free society. I didn't really. Did I address the teacher issue enough? I probably didn't really.
It's how do you get a city to be profitable? How do you get it to work more like a company that generates revenue other than just taxes? So how do you get people to fork their money over and say, here, take my money. I want something in return. Can the city take the wastewater and turn it into a product? Can it turn the trash into a product, something it could sell? What's the name? Elon. He's doing the boring company, and he's taking that dirt, making bricks out of it. What can a city do to create a product to have people fork their money over in order to generate that income and pay teachers and everyone else. I mean,
well,
any ideas? Like,
yeah, this is actually a great application for that digital twin technology and adaptive machine learning. If we put in data about demographics, education levels, we can actually create a very data-rich environment to make well-designed solutions, for not just education, but for property incomes. I mean, the city of Thousand Oaks, the budget for it is around $1 billion, and it's basically, I'm running to be on the board of directors of a municipal corporation with $1 billion budget, and even though I think it's really the city manager, a very talented city manager, he's like doing most of the heavy lifting, and I sometimes think the city council people are just kind of there as window dressing. Oh yeah, we're going to vote yes or no, and it's a majority. Three yes votes will pass a city ordinance or function, but it's really a well-run city. It's got an amazing talent staff, but yeah, I think the digital twin should be a collaborative between public and private data sets. The city's got a huge data set rich thing. I mean, GIS, geographic information systems, that's everything can become a information layer on these digital twin problem solving systems.
well,
So I would
and you have, say, like Tesla. Okay, they're mapping all the streets. Okay, Google has mapped all the streets. I mean, did the city ever get compensation from, let's say, Google or Tesla? In fact, they're having the right to basically photograph everything and map and get that GIS type data. Any sort of tax on that? Is that some way a city can generate some revenue?
Yeah, that's a huge question, is like intellectual property of data sets. I'm a big fan of open Creative Commons sharing of data whenever possible. I think the patent system and the trademark system is incredibly archaic, and it's holding back progress in many instances. There's I think it's called the Open Event Data System, and I don't know if it ever got launched, but they had kind of a cool mascot, the jackrabbit. The jackrabbit is agile, and he's jumping here and there, and so I'm a big fan of open source technology. I think we have a DIY maker space club here that I go to their weekly meetings. In fact, we're going to have a booth at the upcoming street fair here in town, and my goal is to have a 3D printed model of our local watershed, because I think fixing these mass extinction questions is going to have to happen on a watershed by watershed basis. A watershed, if you don't know, it's basically the terrain defined precipitation basin where all the incoming water is going to flow down to a common point. Usually it's named after the water feature that's, so ours is the Cayugas Creek watershed, and it is about 300 square miles. And so I think
I
looking
heard
at
that,
stewarding that is.
I heard that somebody said that we would have been better to make our states and divide and our borders in that defined by the watershed.
Yeah, that is actually the natural relevant border, because you've got ecosystems and biomes and water issues. We actually have a very hazardous waste site, the old Santa Susana Field Laboratory, where they actually had a meltdown of a experimental sodium reactor, and they test Rocketdyne ran that, and they tested all the third stages for Apollo, and it would break windows for like 10 miles around. But yeah, there's a huge groundwater contamination problem there. So that's part of the watershed's not just above ground, but you have to include the groundwater factors.
Yes. Yeah, so this was quite an interesting conversation. I just wanted to bring in some viewer comments. So Alan Crowley writes, most cities make clean water out of wastewater. So that's on the watershed issue. And on the issue of public schools, Jennifer Hughes, who was endorsed by us in 2021 to run for mayor of Camden, New Jersey, writes that a lot of progressive countries have free education and even pay the students while they are in school. I am fond of the idea of paying students. Indeed, a lot of school work is essentially analogous to work that people do on the job, except in cases of school, people pay sometimes for the privilege to do that work, whereas on the job, they get paid to do that work. But sometimes the exertion required is comparable. Mike Lazine sees an issue that a lot of classrooms in many places are overcrowded. And Jennifer also notes that Colorado used profits from the cannabis sales tax to fund their public schools. So the U.S. Transhumanist Party does support legalization of marijuana, and this is one potential use of the revenue that is derived from doing so. So the U.S. Transhumanist Party has an approach to education in Section 12 of its platform, which reads that the United States Transhumanist Party holds that present and future societies should provide education systems accessible and available to all in pursuit of factual knowledge to increase intellectual acuity, promote critical thinking and logic, foster creativity, form an enlightened collective, attain health, secure the bounty of liberty for all sentient entities, for our posterity, and forge new ideas, meanings, and values. The United States Transhumanist Party supports efforts to reduce the cost of education while improving its access. In particular, the United States Transhumanist Party supports freely available open source methods of learning, teaching, credentialing, and cultural creation that integrate emerging technologies into every facet of the learning process. So, Dan, you talked about open source technologies, and this is part of our platform. Furthermore, the United States Transhumanist Party primarily advocates private innovation to deliver such educational improvements, but also advocates the application of these improvements to all publicly funded educational institutions. So if there is a technology, an open source technology that could be applied to public schools, this could be one of the solutions to the funding issues that arise there. And the United States Transhumanist Party holds that every person should aspire toward intellectual, moral, and aesthetic enlightenment and sophistication, and should contribute toward bringing about a new age of reason, where the highest reaches of intellectual activity are attainable and eagerly pursued by the majority of the population. So I know, Dan, that you've mentioned a lot of creative ideas for improving the governance and public infrastructure in Thousand Oaks, and also making the government more participatory and more voluntary. And my question for you is, do you think that kind of participatory governance with the discussion of many potential ideas for reform is going to help with educating the public about the possibilities for the future? Do you think that could stimulate some discussions along the lines of the conversations that we have at these virtual enlightenment salons?
You know, there's a few points that come to mind when you talk about education. Someone once said the fastest way to increase your intelligence is to meet as many new people as possible. That's becoming more doable through online digital technologies. Another thing I think that's important is people tend to really support something that they help to create. So I think getting people involved in collaborative creating with new people, you know, say with public art, or, you know, these little free libraries, or just doing something like having dinner once a week on your front lawn, you know, letting people drop over and you know, getting to know your neighbors. Like when I was collecting the signatures for my ballot petition, a guy a few doors down, turns out he was a movie special effects guy for 45 years at Universal. I'm like, wow, I'm kind of a frustrated filmmaker. This is like, would be a cool guy to get to know better. A gal on the block is into permaculture and she's very excited about community gardening kinds of resilience issues. So, and then they also say the best way to learn something is to teach it. And I've found that there's enough resources that if you really want to get good at something, the old Little Red Schoolhouse, for example, it was set up in such a way that the grade higher up would teach the grade lower. So it was a way that you could have grades kindergarten through 7th grade, let's say, and one teacher could run the whole thing because the students were as they got skilled, they were teaching the less skilled grade level. That system could be replicated quite easily. We have a great system of free community college in California. In fact, I'm a student at an online community college called Calbright, which was just created recently, and I'm on their computer security track. I'm one test away from completing the A+ certification that the CompTIA Computer Industries Association offers. Then after I've got that, then I can take the computer security prerequisite certification test. So they even sent me a laptop, loaner laptop to be a part of that training program. So supporting educational opportunities should be at the core of transhumanist thoughts and practice. And there's a whole bunch of great ideas along those lines.
Yes, and hopefully these kinds of educational undertakings can assist with our goal of catalyzing a new age of enlightenment. It would certainly be great to see these kinds of discussions at this caliber spreading throughout the population. Now, also for those who are interested, we have shared the link to the Tunaville Facebook group that Daniel has organized. And furthermore, I would like to acknowledge this comment by our friend Jennifer Hughes, who says, "Thank you for running, Dan. Running for office isn't easy." And she commends anyone doing that because this helps to make a better world. So thank you, Jennifer, for those remarks. And I'm glad that we have a previous candidate speaking with a candidate who is currently running in this way. So, Dan, I think this would be a good opportunity to ask you, in terms of some of the events that have taken place in your campaign when you're reaching out to people, how are you finding the reception? And furthermore, what are the day-to-day logistics of your campaign? How do your campaign activities look, just so that we can get an impression of some of your efforts on the ground?
Well, I could probably be a lot more of a full-time candidate. I'm kind of just a part-time candidate right now, but I do get various emails. I got one recently from a Ventura County Rifle and Gun Owners Society that would like me to come and speak to their group about my opinions about self-defense policy. There was I kind of consider myself aspiring comedy writer, stand-up comedian, and I actually sort of got a chance to break up the other candidates a couple years ago at one of the forums. There was a question about entertainment options in Thousand Oaks. We used to have a bowling alley. I don't think we have that, but how I answered the question, I said, well, there are science activities that can be entertaining, and there's actually a citizen science campaign called Soil Your Undies, where you bury a pair of 100% cotton underwear for 60 days in the soil you want to test. And if your soil has good microbial diversity and activity, basically they'll be all eaten away by the microbes. And if your soil's dead, they'll be pretty much intact. This is kind of a humorous, I think it's the Soil Conservation Agency of Canada that started this. They have a cute little animated cartoon. But I answered this, and the next candidate was like cracking up and red faced. He's like, "I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?" You know, so it was just kind of a humorous moment. But actually, I think citizen science is entertaining, and it is underutilized. And I mean, there are groups where you can do radio astronomy. You can count muons from cosmic sources with there's a muon detector that you can build for $100, and if you take 2 of them, you can see what direction these secondary high energy particles are coming from. A neighbor of mine, Pam Hoffman, does a weekly astronomy podcast called Everyday Spacer, and that's a great podcast you can find. She's actually written a little book called the Itty Bitty Explore Space book. So she's a supporter of the campaign and science education. Did I go off on a tangent there? What was the original question there?
Well, the original question was just to tell us a bit more about the day-to-day logistics of your campaign and what you're seeing on the ground in terms of the responses that you're encountering, as well as the activities that you're engaging in to reach out to the people in Thousand Oaks.
Well, everyone that I described the idea of the permaculture trail around the world to is pretty much universally positive on that. And so that's kind of something I tend to lead with. And I love the idea of Thousand Oaks kind of being the headquarter city for it, because we have this great open space heritage here. So the completion date, by the way, is going to be the 100th anniversary of the UN Declaration of Universal Human Rights, which Human Rights Day is December 10th, 2048. So Trocadero Plaza in Paris, save the date. That'll be the ribbon cutting for the grand permatrail around the world, Freedom to Roam Greenway. I actually have a friend who's a big supporter, who's basically living on public lands nomadically in Arizona. She's in Quartzsite, Arizona, has traveled around, and you really can, live for cheap or free on in a vehicle on BLM and other public lands. It's called dispersed camping, and it's not the best solution maybe to the unhousedness problem, but it is one option for people. So I'm an advocate for freedom to roam and public facilities. Like you can roam, but you might not find a bathroom, or you might not find an overnight camping space. So, I think it's that's something that has to be addressed. So we have equity among all segments of our population. So I've been differently housed in my life, so I'm kind of a simpatico spokesperson for people who are experiencing different domicile conditions. But I'm currently a live-in caregiver here. I'm taking care of a 78-year-old stroke survivor. So that's my room and board situation right now. But yeah, I'm a certified caregiver, and this is an aging demographic here. So that's something that gives me some connection to the city and its residents. But yeah, I'm just going to all the campaign events I can, and keeping the money out of politics. but I'll take the $5. So thanks again, Mr.
Yes,
Mr. Crowley.
indeed. And it's admirable that you do all of that. And Alan Crowley also wonders, how does one get more information about permatrails?
If you go to permatrail.org, it will point you to a Facebook group that I've been running for a couple years. I think there's actually 2 pages, a group and a community, or whatever, the information page and group page. I need to figure out how to merge those. But again, I'm not working on it full time. It's kind of a part-time enterprise. I did enter the Buckminster Fuller Institute Challenge in 2018 with the idea of the Permatrail Project, and was a $100 entry fee, but it didn't win. But that would have been, I think, $100,000 funding for the winning entry. But yeah, the ideas of Buckminster Fuller, I can't speak more highly about what a great anticipatory design scientist he was, and he kept saying, "I'm just an average human, that decided to see what use he could put himself to in the world," and I think that's a great starting point for anyone.
Wonderful. And Jason, did you want to add anything to Dan's remarks here?
I love the Buckminster Fuller thing too. Yeah. I'm just a normal person trying to add to this situation. So yeah, you mentioned so much cool stuff. That muon tech. I think that's the same kind of tech that found a new giant chamber in the Great Pyramid.
Exactly.
A few years ago.
Yeah.
That's like wow. And I think Thousand Oaks is probably ideally positioned to, for smart infrastructure, and
yeah.
So, yeah, that's it. I can pass it back.
All right. Well, thank you to Jason. And John H. wonders, Dan, what do you think your chances are?
Well, if I double from 3% to 6%, I will consider that a success, and I will run again in 2024 with a hopefully even more developed platform. I'm working on a book, which I was hoping to have ready for this election cycle, but I think the plan and the votes might be on track to mature at the same rate. So I have fun running, and I'm going to keep doing it. So maybe I'll do it even if I don't double my votes. Who knows? It's just good to have the exposure and the ability to give back, and promote ideas.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer, Dan. And of course, for the candidates we endorse as the U.S. Transhumanist Party, winning is not our foremost priority. Our foremost priority is spreading transhumanist ideas. So to the extent that a candidacy is able to do that, we would consider it beneficial and we would consider it worthy of our support. So I'm glad that you're looking to increase your vote total. That would, of course, increase your reach and your ability to serve as an apt and effective spokesperson for the ideas of transhumanism. Now, David Shoemaker has a question. David, please proceed.
Yeah, my question is kind of a follow-up on endorsement. I really look forward to participating in voting for saying that, yeah, I'd like to see the USTP endorse you. But what about endorsements in Thousand Oaks itself? Who would be big leverage in Thousand Oaks? Prior mayor, some civic body. Have you looked into those? Because doing candidate meet and greets is great, and you get votes one at a time, and those are generally fairly secure votes. When you shake somebody's hand, look them in the eye, that's good. But endorsements are very powerful too, and I'm just wondering, what are the big, powerful endorsers that are there, and what do you have to offer them?
Yeah, that's great. I do need to aggressively go after endorsements both inside the city and outside, although, of course, the ones inside the city are considered more valuable. I did, when I ran in 2020, I was at our local ham radio club, CVARC, Conejo Valley Amateur Radio Club, and there was a speaker there from the ARRL, who was the Tri-County region for Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, and one more county I'm forgetting, blanking, San Luis Obispo County. So I mentioned I was running, and he said, I endorse you, vote for this guy. He's a ham, So that was a pretty easy one-shot endorsement to get. I never really promoted that, but I did take the CERT training program. That's the Community Emergency Response Team. That's kind of an auxiliary of FEMA. It's, the Federal Emergency Management Agency recognizes that in a big disaster, they're going to need civilian auxiliary teams. So I took that training, and that actually CERT started at a Los Angeles Fire Department in the 1980s. And our mayor, our current mayor, Bob Engler, is a former fire chief of Hermosa Beach, California, which is next door to where I grew up, Manhattan Beach. And our mayor pro tem, in fact, Ed Jones, he's like 91, but he's a very big advocate of open space. He's on the COSCA, the Open Space Conservation Agency board. So I'm looking forward to possibly an endorsement from him for the permatrail concept. I think that's not out of the realm of possibility. And I really think CERT needs to be more proactive, not just deal with acute emergencies, but have a kind of chronic resilience structure where we are preventing the severity of an emergency, like a power grid down or disruption of. I mean, one thing we're overdue for a very large seismic event on the San Andreas Fault, and there are probably 60,000 unreinforced brick chimneys that are going to become flying projectiles in the event we get that big, 7 or 8 magnitude shaker. So just program to wrap these unreinforced chimneys with some kind of decorative structural reinforcement that could save potentially dozens of lives. Knowing who has a medical condition, when an emergency responder shows up, that should be something that should be implemented already. It's people could have QR codes on their mailboxes that the fire department or the responder could scan and say, okay, there's this many people in the house, this many pets, they have these conditions, there's these hazards and whatnot. I think that's something that's kind of a no-brainer that the city should act on. And again, I think the ham radio community is perfect for deploying some of these solutions. But again, I think I forgot the question. Went off on a tangent there.
Yes, so I think it's interesting to consider what you said about CERT. Ben Ballweg wonders if this is aligned with Section 109 of the USTP platform, which reads, the United States Transhumanist Party supports establishing a rapid 3-month training and certification program for hundreds of thousands of medical personnel, specifically for responding to the COVID-19 outbreak and other pandemics. So based on what you know about CERT, do you think it could help fulfill a purpose like that?
Definitely. In fact, I was on a webinar with one of the higher ups in CERT, and I asked specifically the question, is there any emergency so dire that CERT would not try to respond to it? And he said, nope, we're basically any level of emergency is fair game for what we're trying to accomplish with CERT. And their manual is pretty thick, but it could be thicker. It could be more comprehensive. And again, I think this is a great use for the virtual sandbox, digital twin kind of predictive learning algorithms. I did not quite complete the CERT training because the final exam for CERT was what's called a mass casualty event simulation. It was going to be held at the Camarillo Airport, and that's where you have 20 seconds per crisis actor to assess them, put a triage tag on them. But this was right when the COVID pandemic was breaking out, so I was not interested in being part of a big mass potential way to get infected with a bunch of strangers. But I'm still semi-certified as a CERT person. But I guess we'll and you can take the training online, by the way. There, if you do a online search for online CERT training, that's a great resource. In fact, there's another interesting document that's just been published and it's especially relevant with the war in Ukraine. It's called ROC, which is Resistance Operating Concept, and it's basically kind of like CERT, only in the domain of civil defense against hostile enemy actors. So it's like a 250-page document that's very interesting reading. You can get that for free. I don't have the link handy, but just search Resistance Operating Concept, and it's kind of like CERT on defensive steroids.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan, for that answer. And in the 4 minutes that we have remaining in our virtual enlightenment salon, are there any concluding thoughts that you would like to share with our viewers? In particular, if there's any aspect of your campaign or ideas that you haven't had the opportunity to mention, or anything that has been said today that you would like to elaborate upon, this is your opportunity.
I would say don't be afraid to push your governments into these neglected territories that they traditionally are not looking at. Don't be afraid to get to know your neighbors. Don't be afraid to become publicly involved. You don't have to run for office to be a public service minded person. You can do it in so many fun and interesting ways. And this is a very precarious time for open societies and for democracies. So it's no time to sit on the sidelines while bad actors ply their their ways. I mean, basically, 1/3 of the world is not the free world, and there are people that are effectively in open air concentration camps, and we can't forget about them. We are privileged to not be, as enslaved as those other people, but we shouldn't take that situation lightly or for granted. So be resilient, do everything you can, and vote transhumanist.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dan, for that. Indeed, vote transhumanist. I would like to highlight some comments made by our viewer Knight Rider, who says, I think it's great providing a positive outlet for people who otherwise might not have a say. I think we need to educate and reinforce our collective understanding that positive inclusion and education serve us all for the better. And of course, we completely agree with those sentiments here at the U.S. Transhumanist Party. It's one reason why we try to highlight a broad spectrum of voices, and why we also follow a big tent inclusive approach as part of the U.S. Transhumanist Party's approach. And with our candidates, we hope to achieve the same results with regard to the broader public. Now, I think Dan's candidacy could appeal to a wide spectrum of residents of Thousand Oaks, California, because he provides a lot of ideas for innovative solutions to the specific issues that that community faces, and in a way that could bring many of the residents into the conversation, lead them to feel included, lead them to suggest ideas of their own. So we are going to hold an endorsement vote for Dan's candidacy in the coming weeks, and we hope that as many of our viewers as possible will participate in that vote. Of course, if you are a member of the Transhumanist Party, you will receive a ballot via email. If you are not a member of the Transhumanist Party yet, go to transhumanist-party.org/membership and join us free of charge. No matter where you reside, you would be able to then vote on the endorsement of Daniel Tweed for his campaign for City Council of Thousand Oaks, California, after you become a member. So thank you to all of our officers for joining. Thank you to all of our viewers for your thoughtful questions and commentary. And thank you to Daniel Tweed for spending an hour and 54 minutes with us today. To everyone, until next time, live long and prosper.